Hello everyone, it's Saoirse. Welcome to the first specific book talk of this year. I'm excited to get into this one, although it is very, very depressing, and I will issue a content warning right now. This book that we're going to talk about is No Longer Human by Osamu Dazai, and its main theme is suicide. So don't watch or read if that will be an issue for you. And really, I've got to stress, don't read this book if you're in an extremely fragile place. It could be extremely triggering for you. It was hard for me to see how much of it I related to, and we will get into all of those upsetting things, but I'll just read you the back first. Portraying himself as a failure, the protagonist of Osamu Dazai's No Longer Human narrates a seemingly normal life, even while he feels himself incapable of understanding human beings. Oba Yozo's attempts to reconcile himself to the world around him begin in early childhood, continue through high school, where he becomes a clown to mask his alienation, and eventually lead to a failed suicide attempt as an adult. Without sentimentality, he records the casual cruelties of life and its fleeting moments of human connection and tenderness. Semi-autobiographical, No Longer Human is the final completed work of one of Japan's most important writers, Osamu Dazai. The novel, and it was published in 1948, if I didn't say that, which is also when he died by suicide. The novel has come to echo the sentiments of youth from post-war Japan to the postmodern society of technology. Still one of the 10 best-selling books in Japan, No Longer Human is a powerful exploration of an individual's alienation from society. So all the descriptions and like the quotes on the back sold me on it as something that I thought I could relate to, but it is even more dark than that. I think reviews tend to tread lightly when dealing with subject matter like this. And the reality is, you can't really tread lightly when it comes to this stuff. So let's jump right in. The original title, by the way, the exact translation, we have No Longer Human, but if you translate it from Japanese, it's disqualified as a human being, which is 10 times more heartbreaking, I think. So it's first person, but it's framed as notebooks that have been found by somebody else. So there's a first person sort of bookend to the first person notebooks that are actually Yozo's. All right, what is the first thing we want to look at here? I'm just going to pull out some quotes. You know how we do here. Indeed, the more carefully you examine the child's smiling face, the more you feel an indescribable, unspeakable horror creeping over you. You see that it is actually not a smiling face at all. The boy has not a suggestion of a smile. Look at his tightly clenched fists if you want proof. No human being can smile with his fists doubled like that. It is a monkey, a grinning monkey face. The smile is nothing more than a puckering of ugly wrinkles. The photograph reproduces an expression so freakish and at the same time so unclean and even nauseating that your impulse is to say, what a wizened, hideous little boy. I have never seen a child with such an unaccountable expression. And this is the opening narrator upon looking at a photo of Yozo. So I read that and I just thought how Yozo must feel evil because he can't fit in. The way that he's described as just being this horrific thing. And anytime there's something creepy behind a smile, that's usually like an evil character. So I know I relate to the idea of feeling like this poisonous slime that just exists, getting in the way of normal people going about their lives. And yeah, it's not a good feeling. Working on that, but so many heartbreaking passages in here that really made me pause. So I liked this bit when Yozo is talking about the train station and the bridge that goes over so you can get from one platform to the other, and he didn't realize what that was for. I was convinced that the bridge had been provided to lend an exotic touch and to make the station premises a place of pleasant diversity, like some foreign playground. I remained under this delusion for quite a long time, and it was for me a very refined amusement, indeed, to climb up and down the bridge. I thought that it was one of the most elegant services provided by the railways. When later I discovered that the bridge was nothing more than a utilitarian device, I lost all interest in it. So he has this love of fantasy and absolute hatred of the mundane, of the utilitarian, normal life, which is, I think, common in, I don't know how to word a lot of these things, so bear with me, but people who look at the world a certain way because of their mental state, and I am always counting myself as one of these people, so I'm not just like stepping out of line and trying to speak for these people, but I have felt that when I'm at my most depressed and pessimistic, things being completely ordinary are depressing. And now I am capable these days of getting into a better state of mind where ordinary things are the most pleasing and wonderful because they are so ordinary. But here you can see that he's really completely in the depths of despair. So nothing is going to make him happy. For this one I wrote, a person's circumstances don't indicate their mental state because people have told me really more times than I can remember ever since I was a small boy how lucky I was, but I have always felt as if I were suffering in hell. It has seemed to me, in fact, that those who called me lucky were incomparably more fortunate than I. So I really dislike when people have no compassion or empathy for celebrities. That, maybe they're going through a horrible public divorce or something, or just something awful has happened to them. Their house burns down. I don't know. And everyone just goes, oh, well, they're rich, so it's fine. They're rich. Like that just excuses all feelings. Like you cannot have feelings if you're in a different station of life. It's so crazy. And he grows up in a wealthy family, which makes this all the more interesting to me because it's very easy to picture characters who are situationally depressed. Of course it's hard to be in poverty. Of course it's hard to grow up with nothing, and to overcome that and find happiness is a whole other story. This story is you have everything provided for you and you're still not okay. And it's very much a mental illness, a chemical imbalance, something that goes untreated and seems hopeless. Yeah. So yes, a person's circumstances don't indicate their mental state. Do not judge people. If you think they're beautiful and wealthy and have everything that you want, that does not mean they're happy. So in this book, he talks about how he becomes this sort of goof, this wild goofball, and it is totally an act, and it's like what he does to fit in, to play this part. So he feels forced to play this part in order to participate at all in the world, because otherwise he's not going to participate. This was how I happened to invent my clowning. It was the last quest for love I was to direct at human beings. Although I had a mortal dread of human beings, I seemed quite unable to renounce their society. I managed to maintain on the surface a smile which never deserted my lips. This was the accommodation I offered to others, a most precarious achievement performed by me only at the cost of excruciating efforts within. It says, before anyone realized it, I had become an accomplished clown, a child who never spoke a single truthful word. It's horrible. Like he feels like everybody else knows something about how to fit in and how to be a human, because he constantly talks about not being a human being like everybody else is. He thinks they know this secret and nobody's told him, and so he's had to live this miserable life because of that. So he has this external apathy that he displays while having an inner terror. So apathy and despondency and inner terror. Let's see, what highlights that? I never once answered back anything said to me by my family. The least word of reproof struck me with the force of a thunderbolt and drove me almost out of my head. Answer back. Far from it, I felt convinced that their reprimands were without doubt voices of human truth speaking to me from eternities past. I was obsessed with the idea that since I lacked the strength to act in accordance with this truth, I might already have been disqualified from living among human beings. This belief made me incapable of arguments or self-justification. Whenever anyone criticized me, I felt certain that I had been living under the most dreadful misapprehension. I always accepted the attack in silence, though inwardly so terrified as almost to be out of my mind. So, oh, my neck. Good, perfect example of the internal struggle that he goes through while not showing anybody that. Whenever I was asked what I wanted, my first impulse was to answer nothing. The thought went through my mind that it didn't make any difference, that nothing was going to make me happy. This is when his father is asking his children, what do you want when I go to the city, like for a present? And right there you have this picture of childhood depression, where he already knows nothing's going to make me happy, or he thinks nothing's going to make him happy, so why ask for anything? And yet he feels he has to please his father by asking for what his dad thinks he wants. He's always trying to calculate what other people are getting at. He feels like people are so very unclear with their requests. I am convinced that human life is filled with many pure, happy, serene examples of insincerity, truly splendid of their kind, of people deceiving one another without, strangely enough, any wounds being inflicted, of people who seem unaware even that they are deceiving one another. But I have no special interest in instances of mutual deception. I myself spent the whole day long deceiving human beings with my clowning. Oh yeah, okay, I'll continue because he talks about the secret. I have not been able to work up much concern over the morality prescribed in textbooks of ethics under such names as righteousness. I find it difficult to understand the kind of human being who lives or is sure he can live purely, happily, serenely while engaged in deceit. Human beings never did teach me that abstruse secret. If I had only known that one thing, I should never have had to dread human beings so, nor should I have opposed myself to human life, nor tasted such torments of hell every night. In short, I believe that the reason why I did not tell anyone about that loathsome crime perpetrated on me by the servants was not because of distrust for human beings, nor of course because of Christian leanings, but because the human beings around me had rigorously sealed me off from the world of trust or distrust. Even my parents at times displayed attitudes which were hard for me to understand. So I didn't read too much about this book after I finished it, but he strikes me as having neurodivergent aspects to him, and like that he can't read people. It's hard for him to understand his own parents, and I wonder if this author had lived today, who would have diagnosed him with what? Just something to think about. But there he tells us that he feels like there is this secret and he's just been completely excluded from being a human being because other people wouldn't tell him how. And I like that part about sincere insincerity. I mean, it's so pessimistic. He's like, I'm sure that there's wonderful examples, serene examples of insincerity, splendid. Like, that's some great thing. So he has this friend in school who sees through his clowning exterior, like, right away. I would devote the hours spent with him to persuading him that my antics were not on purpose, but the genuine article. If things went well, I would like to become his inseparable friend, but if this proved utterly impossible, I had no choice but to pray for his death. Typically enough, the one thing that never occurred to me was to kill him. During the course of my life, I have wished innumerable times that I might meet with a violent death, but I have never once desired to kill anybody. I thought that in killing a dreaded adversary, I might actually be bringing him happiness. Ooh, that's sad on many levels. So I wrote, extreme conclusions come from extreme despair. He's so deep in it that he thinks the only way to deal with this situation is to pray for this person to die if they figure out my secret that I'm actually making up this clowning persona. Okay, now let's talk about some instances of real sexism in this book, and I don't know quite what to get from that. If the author was really like this, if it's a product of his time, how it factors into his suicidality, I don't know. He says, he's talking about women. Women were less demanding than men when it came to my clowning. Women have no sense of moderation. No matter how long I went on with my antics, they would ask for more, and I would become exhausted responding to their insatiable demands for encores. They really laugh an amazing amount of the time. I suppose one can say that women stuff themselves with far more pleasures than men. And then, oh, I can't read my writing. There it is. He, excuse the backwards term for sex workers, but he says he goes to sleep, like actually sleep with these prostitutes. Friendliness with no ulterior motive, friendliness stripped of high-pressure salesmanship, for someone who might never come again. Some nights I saw these imbecile lunatic prostitutes with the halo of Mary. So, on one hand, he's calling them imbecile lunatic prostitutes, and on the other hand, they have the halo of Mary because they're the only way that he can connect with other people and sleep soundly. He says, I could never think of prostitutes as human beings or even as women, but in their arms I felt absolute security. Not a good attitude to gain something from someone while seeing them as less than human, but in a way maybe he's seeing them as kind of equal to him because he feels less than human. I don't know. Let me know your thoughts on this. She rambled on, but I have never been able to get interested when women talk about themselves. It may be because women are so inept at telling a story, that is because they place the emphasis in the wrong places, or for some other reason. In any case, I have always turned them a deaf ear. So he doesn't even listen to women, he just doesn't find them interesting. And so another aspect of this book is that this character, he sees it as kind of this, oh my god, what's the word, like, prophecy that he wants no part of, which is that he's extremely handsome and appealing to women. But he doesn't get anything out of, human connection. He can't really connect to people, so this fact that women are falling all over him, it really is more annoying than anything and more depressing. So again, somebody can, from the outside looking in, you see a guy who's wealthy and good looking and women are falling all over him. He's horribly depressed and suicidal. So you really never know what's going on. Okay, this passage about social anxiety I found very, very relatable. So he moves to Tokyo. To tell the truth, when I first came to the city, I was afraid to board a streetcar because of the conductor. I was afraid to enter the Kabuki theater for fear of the usherettes standing along the sides of the red-carpeted staircase at the main entrance. I was afraid to go into a restaurant because I was intimidated by the waiters furtively hovering behind me, waiting for my plate to be emptied. Most of all, I dreaded paying a bill. My awkwardness when I handed over the money after buying something did not arise from any stinginess, but from excessive tension, excessive embarrassment, excessive uneasiness and apprehension. My eyes would swim in my head and the whole world grow dark before me so that I felt half out of my mind. There was no question of bargaining. Not only did I often forget to pick up my change, but I quite frequently forgot to take home the things I had purchased. It was quite impossible for me to make my way around Tokyo by myself. I had no choice but to spend whole days at a time lolling about the house. He feels he has no choice but to stay home because he's in such paralyzing fear about going out into the world. And it is always related to interactions with other people. And that was just really sad for me to read because I have stopped myself many times from going into establishments that I'm interested in because I'm afraid of the way I'm going to walk through the door, the people looking at me when I come in, having to speak if somebody asks me if I need help, having to ask for help. It's all really scary when you have social anxiety, and I just thought that was a very heartbreaking bit there. And then this passage is, this is rough too. Irrationality. I found the thought faintly pleasurable, or rather I felt at ease with it. What frightened me was the logic of the world. In it lay the foretaste of something incalculably powerful. Its mechanism was incomprehensible, and I could not possibly remain closeted in that windowless, bone-chilling room. Though outside lay the sea of irrationality, it was far more agreeable to swim in its waters until presently I drowned. People talk of social outcasts. The words apparently denote the miserable losers of the world, the vicious ones, but I feel as though I have been a social outcast from the moment I was born. If ever I meet someone society has designated as an outcast, I invariably feel affection for him, an emotion which carries me away in melting tenderness. There's a lot there. He'd rather drown than face the actual logic of the world. Yeah, he'd rather keep swimming in this irrationality because he's so afraid of the way that things actually are. And then this thing about social outcasts, he rarely feels tenderness or talks about feeling that way for anyone, but he gets carried away in a melting tenderness when he feels he's found kind of a kindred spirit, somebody else that the world has deemed different. And yeah, that's again, it's his fear of logic and truth because he is always being deceitful, he thinks, with his clowning, putting on a show for people. So he feels he doesn't understand truth or want anything to do with it at this point because the secrets of it have been hidden from him. I felt afraid no matter where I was. I wondered if the best way to obtain some surcease from this relentless feeling might not be to lose myself in the world of some big cafe where I would be rubbed against by crowds of drunken guests, waitresses, and porters. So he's very anxious. He's constantly on edge. And like that doesn't go away no matter where he goes. So of course he's going to feel it in public around other people, but he thinks maybe he can lose himself by getting surrounded by other people. His mind goes through a lot of different conjecturing throughout this book of like how can he keep this up, because it's exhausting. He has multiple relationships with women, and after one, he says, I didn't meet my benefactor of that night again for a whole month. After leaving her, my happiness grew fainter every day that went by. It frightened me even that I had accepted a moment's kindness. I felt I had imposed horrible bonds on myself. So he is refusing to be happy. He knows that he felt it and that it's going away as he doesn't see this woman anymore. And rather than be hopeful about the fact that he can feel that, he can feel something good with another person, he feels like he's put these bonds on himself because now now he's shackled to this knowledge that, oh, he can feel happy and it can go away. And so he's used to living in a void with no happiness whatsoever. Perhaps it's even worse for him to experience it and have it taken away, to know that that's possible for him. That's a whole new feeling of pain, if that makes sense. And at one point, he attempts suicide with a woman by drowning. She dies, and he doesn't. And then he gets taken in by the police because he's connected to her death. The experience hadn't upset me in the least. I missed the custody room in the police station and even the old policeman. What, I wonder, makes me that way? When they tied me up as a criminal, I actually felt relieved, a calm, relaxed feeling. Even now, as I write down my recollections of those days, I feel a really expansive, agreeable sensation. So I see this as he finds it relaxing to have his control taken away, because now he's no longer responsible for his misery. It's in the hands of somebody else. That is a very freeing feeling. And this really made me think of, it's a completely different character and story, but it made me think of the movie Breakfast on Pluto, where the main character is arrested on suspicion of being involved in a bombing, and this character is so comforted by being in jail and becomes close to the police officer and doesn't want to leave, says, please keep me in my sweet cell, like let me stay there. And I got that vibe with this, that takes away, like, that character had these years of wandering and not knowing what they were doing and searching for something that really wasn't going to happen. And so to have everything kind of set up for you, like this is how it is, you're just in custody and we're going to question you and we're going to take you from this location to that location, you don't really have to think about anything. As horrible as that is, it's a relief for a character like this, who has been feeling like they're just struggling out in the wild on their own. It's hard to articulate. So I think he's talking about this one officer who, again, like his friend in school, sees through this facade of being a clown. He says, even now the recollection makes me feel so embarrassed I can't sit still. It was worse, I am sure, even than when in high school I was plummeted into hell by that stupid Takechi tapping me on the back and saying, you did it on purpose. Those were the two great disasters in a lifetime of acting. Sometimes I have even thought that I should have preferred to be sentenced to 10 years imprisonment rather than meet with such gentle contempt from the district attorney. So he cannot bear to have his true nature be perceived, because he tells himself he doesn't know what his true nature is. He's just made up this character that he uses to go about the world in, and to have anybody see through that is completely intolerable. Here we see how he isolates himself because of his fear. It says, the front door of another person's house terrified me more than the gate of inferno in the Divine Comedy, and I am not exaggerating when I say that I really felt I could detect within the door the presence of a horrible dragon-like monster writhing there with a dank, raw smell. I had no friends. I had nowhere to go. That's how he feels just standing at somebody's door, like he's got to knock on the door, no matter who's behind it. You know, somebody who he absolutely loathes or somebody who he tolerates, it doesn't matter. Just the front door of another person's house. Imagine how isolating that is when you're that afraid to make contact. I was frightened even by God. I could not believe in his love, only in his punishment. Faith, that I felt was the act of facing the tribunal of justice with one's head bowed to receive the scourge of God. I could believe in hell, but it was impossible for me to believe in the existence of heaven. So he has this imagination that we see from a young age, but it only extends to sorrow, it only extends to negative things. He can't picture there being a heaven, but he certainly refers to hell many, many times throughout the book. Is it not true that no two human beings understand anything whatsoever about each other? That those who consider themselves bosom friends may be utterly mistaken about their fellow, and failing to realize this sad truth throughout a lifetime, weep when they read in the newspapers about his death? That brings up the question that I ask all the time. Can we ever know each other? Can you ever really know another person? A lot of people feel they don't know themselves, so how could we possibly, through our limited means of communication, even when you feel a soul connection to someone, you can be wrong about feeling that. They might not feel the same way. You might not be getting the vibes that you think they're putting off. And forget words, because as much as I obviously love words, language is so limited. And to have this idea that we're bosom friends and we know everything about each other, it's just impossible. Now, I know this is a pessimistic point of view, and perhaps I'm going to alter it throughout my life, but it is hard to imagine fully knowing another person. And so obviously he has that idea, because that totally fits with everything about his character. You know, of course he's alone, because how could he not be? What other way is there to be? Even the people who think they're not alone are alone in his mind. So he eventually marries someone, and he has this ridiculous idea about the fact that she's a virgin, like really meaning something. I had always imagined that the beauty of virginity was nothing more than the sweet, sentimental illusion of stupid poets, but it really is alive and present in this world. We would get married. In the spring, we'd go together on bicycles to see waterfalls framed in green leaves. So his only hope for happiness comes from these ridiculous fantasies. And this one happens to hinge on a sexist idea that women are more pure when they're virgins, and that somehow that's going to make him happy. That they're going to ride on bicycles and see waterfalls because she's a virgin and the other women he's been with have not been virgins. It makes no sense. But remember, he doesn't like logic. I was taken aback. Horiki at heart did not treat me like a full human being. He could only consider me as the living corpse of a would-be suicide, a person dead to shame, an idiot ghost. His friendship had no other purpose but to utilize me in whichever way would most further his own pleasures. This thought naturally did not make me very happy, but I realized after a moment that it was entirely to be expected that Horiki should take this view of me, that from long ago, even as a child, I seemed to lack the qualifications of a human being, and that for all I knew, contempt, even from Horiki, might be entirely merited. So he chooses friendships that make him worse because they prove him right. And sometimes when you are this depressed, you just want to be proven right that you are justified in being this depressed. That the world is only bad. You will never have anything good happen to you. And don't you see? Because here it is, all written down. This is everything that's happened to me, and it's all been bad. And of course I have bad friends that are cruel to me. And rather than choose other friends, seek out better connections, he sticks with the kind that really reinforces his beliefs about himself. I could hear distinctly from the distance, like an auditory hallucination, the voice of a little girl singing. Unhappiness. There are all kinds of unhappy people in this world. I suppose it would be no exaggeration to say that the world is composed entirely of unhappy people. But those people can fight their unhappiness with society fairly and squarely, and society for its part easily understands and sympathizes with such struggles. My unhappiness stemmed entirely from my own vices, and I had no way of fighting anybody. So here we go back to what I said earlier about you have no way of knowing how mentally ill someone is just by their external circumstances. So difficult circumstances versus mental illness. He's saying that society is going to recognize and sympathize with things like poverty, whereas his unhappiness doesn't come from a lack of anything tangible. It's his own brain, and he's very trapped in it, and he feels he can't be sympathized with. Nobody could see him as a sympathetic character because on the outside it looks like he should be fine. Almost done. I thought, I want to die. I want to die more than ever before. There's no chance now of a recovery. No matter what sort of thing I do, no matter what I do, it's sure to be a failure. Just a final coating applied to my shame. That dream of going on bicycles to see a waterfall framed in summer leaves, it was not for the likes of me. All that can happen now is that one foul, humiliating sin will be piled on another, and my sufferings will become only the more acute. I want to die. I must die. Living itself is the source of sin. So at this point, he's completely hopeless. That's what hopelessness looks like. There is no possibility of anything good ever happening, so why bother? That's where he is here. And then he talks to Horiki again. It says, Horiki sat in front of me and said with a gentle smile, the like of which I had never before seen on his face, I hear you've coughed blood. I felt so grateful, so happy for that gentle smile that I averted my face and wept. I was completely shattered and smothered by that one gentle smile. That was a difficult sentence because I know what that feels like when you're so far gone and there's just one small kindness that wrecks you. And this is why it's so important to always be kind and to reach out to people, whether you're worried about them or not, whether they've expressed scary thoughts or not. Reach out to your friends. Talk to strangers. Don't put yourself in danger, but we all need more connection, and we're all so afraid of each other now and so isolated. And sometimes it takes just one little bit of kindness to change somebody's mind about whether they should live or die. So, okay, that's actually all I'm going to read. And this, yes, as I said, this was the last thing the author wrote. He died by double suicide at age 38. He and a woman took their lives together. So, a very autobiographical book. Some people see it as his will because it was the last thing he wrote. Very sad. I encourage you to look up more about his backstory. I'm interested in reading the other things he's written, but I will need a break because that was extremely heavy. Very, very difficult first book of the year. So maybe we'll have some more uplifting things at some point, but also I do not shy away from things like this because they are very true to my experience and the experience of so many of us, and it is important to read these things that people who have struggled have documented. So, that being said, if you are struggling, please seek help. I'm going to leave a link, like I always do, in the description if you need to talk to somebody. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all next time. Until then, happy reading.